Ohio State is changing. There are some changes being made in Columbus, Ohio. A little refresher here on what the streets are saying. It's crazy how much this is upended over the last 24 months, because 24 short months ago, give or take on the math, the going theory was Michigan would never beat Ohio State again. There was just a stranglehold. Urban had seamlessly transitioned to Ryan Day, and Ryan Day was humming along, recruiting, even maybe ticking a bit up from the days of Urban Meyer, and certainly there was going to be the same intensity and the same focus and the same razor-sharp execution, and the quarterbacks were still going to come through there, and it was the way it was for a little while, until it wasn't. Meemaw's famous saying, things are always the way they are until they are not. Sage wisdom from Meemaw. And so I went from listening to certain people tell me that that team in Columbus was going to dominate forever, to the same people telling me 24 months later, Ohio State can't beat Michigan. Can't. Cannot beat them. Get their best effort, and they still can't beat Michigan. That is a little foolish to me. Maybe they will not, I guess, is something I can pick up if that's what you're putting down. But cannot? This is a really good team. Plus, I presented the science to you the other day that for the past 6 years running, the team with the most first-round draft picks the following April was the team that just won the national championship. And the mock draft community is telling us resoundingly, Ohio State projects to have the most first-rounders next spring, which means, scientifically, not according to me, scientifically, means Ohio State should win the title. It's a little tongue-in-cheek there, but not really, because I think it's going to be a really good team. But anyway, the changes I'm talking about are changes that once upon a time people did not think would happen. But what do we always focus on here? I've already said it once in this show tonight. I always take the sledgehammer this time of year and I pound on the idea that there is a difference, guys, between saying something cannot happen and something just has not happened. There is a lot in this sport that hasn't happened that is dressed up as cannot happen. And let me give you an example. Stop me if you've heard this, or stop yourself if you said this. Ryan Day can't win a national championship. Well, Ryan Day has not won a national championship. That's true. Cannot? Can't win a national title? I call BS on it. I listened to it about Kirby for a long time. Long time, like 4 or 5 years or something like that. And then all of a sudden he ran off 2 in a row, and obviously no one says that anymore. And you can't find anyone to admit that they used to traffic in that nonsense. I believe one day we'll live in a world where Ryan Day will have won a title, maybe more, and no one will admit that they're saying what a lot of people are saying right now, and that is he can't win. No, he hasn't. He hasn't won one. He's gotten close, hasn't won one. That's different than can't win one. But what are these changes? Well, these changes are because of failure. And not failure in the classical sense, because he's got about as good a winning percentage as any coach has had over the last several years, but it's not good enough. And I'm not here to suggest otherwise, and it's not good enough at Ohio State because in consecutive years they have lost to Michigan. In consecutive years they have failed to win the Big Ten championship or even play for one, and they wasted the C.J. Stroud era in doing so. That is not good enough for them. The standard is that high. I don't push back on it. I understand it. I respect it. Failure is a really great motivator, though. Failure is a really great incentivizer. And so, Chris Hummer's got a really good feature over on 247sports.com right now about some of the changes that are happening there, namely in the transfer portal. But I told you at the end of last season, when they lost the Michigan game, then they got a reprieve and they played Georgia, and out of Kirby Smart's own mouth, he said they probably should have beaten us. Well, they didn't. And you go into a very, very long, dark winter, and you're forced to look in the mirror and question everything. You just tear it all down. Now, you may build it back, and it looks exactly the same, but you leave no stone unturned when you do QCRs, when you do quality control reports, when you do self-scouting, when you internally review yourself. You got to go top to bottom, and nothing is off the table. You got to make sure that razor-sharp efficiency in every corner of your program is prioritized. Well, I'll tell you one area where we've seen Ohio State evolve a little bit, and this was in Chris Hummer's feature. So I got 2 quotes for you. One of them is from a year ago. This was Ryan Day talking about the transfer portal. Now listen to how different it's going to sound compared to what I'm about to read you. This is Ryan Day about a year ago. Quote, "We really haven't spent a lot of time focusing on the portal because I think if you want to sustain the program for a long period of time, I think recruits and their families, when you recruit them and talk to them about the plan for them to develop in your program, they want to see that happen. And they really don't want to see a transfer come up and jump somebody in line." Reasonable? Well, then last year happened. And then we fast forward, and this is Ryan Day from earlier this month, according to our friends at Bucknuts. Quote, "As you guys know, we've been very careful to add pieces here, but we know it's a necessary thing. And so we have to sit down at the end of spring and identify what positions do we feel good about, where do we have depth, where do we feel strong, because we know we're going to lose guys along the way, and guys are going to have to step up." They have added triple the amount of 3- and 4-star caliber talent this portal cycle as they did last cycle. And a couple of them are going to be plug-and-play type guys. Jahad Carter, the kid from Syracuse, I believe, 4-star defensive back. They got a kid from Ole Miss, same way. Tywan Malone, since you and I last spoke, they added that big defensive lineman out of Ole Miss, and even if he doesn't start, they're loaded there. That just adds more depth. They've added some big-time pieces, and, last year, Eli Ricks, this player that ended up going to Alabama out of LSU. Ohio State, I don't know if they were in a position to where if they snapped their fingers, they get Eli Ricks. But what I do know, and what Hummer talked about, is they didn't actively pursue him. And Bama did. You can't help but go back to think about the Michigan game or the Georgia game. What difference does one player, one talented player make back there? There's no way to know. So it's a futile attempt at rewriting history. But players in those games, it's not units all the time. Individual players can change the course of seasons, can change championship courses, and can change careers, especially when you're operating on the tightrope that the head coach at Ohio State operates on. So Ohio State's got 7 portal commits right now. Josh Simmons, by the way, is the offensive tackle they got out of San Diego State. He's going to start. I mean, they got him in there to start immediately. That was one of their most glaring needs, offensive tackle. So here's my final point right now on Ohio State. Don't be fooled by thinking the book is written on a guy. So it used to be with head coaches that you coached a couple of different places out of the spotlight before you got a shot at a big-time program. So you had gone through the trial and error phase. You had learned lessons, you had tried out things and found out what does work, what doesn't work. And by the time you get an Ohio State caliber job, you've got like 15 years under your belt. And that's not to mention all the time you spent cutting your teeth as a grad assistant or a position coach or a coordinator. It's not the way it is anymore all the time. And therefore, Ryan Day is at his first head coaching job, and it's Ohio State. The thing about it is you can't change the way progress works. You can't change the way professional maturation works. You still got to learn the lessons. You still got to trial and error. You still got to find out what works, what doesn't work. You still got to make mistakes. No one's immune from it. It's just that nowadays you do it with millions of eyes on you because people are willing to make their job your first shot as a head coach. It would be very foolish to sit here 3 or 4, or in this case, 5 years into a guy's head coaching career and think you know him. Because the reality is the Ryan Day of 2023 is probably not the one we saw in 2020. The Ryan Day of 2027 may have evolved another 15% of his core philosophy from the one we're going to see this year. Guys aren't robots. AI hasn't come that far. They don't just exist in a vacuum. They see things. They experience things. They hire people. New ideas come through their building. They observe new ideas. They get their tail kicked by people and have to look begrudgingly and say, what are they doing better than us? And it hurts. It's a bitter pill to swallow. But anyone who's ever succeeded at the highest level had to go through that and probably will again at some point. So when I hear about what Ryan Day cannot do, I always laugh at it. Same way I did with Smart back in the day. And when you talk about him in definitive terms, here's who he is as a coach, as if it can't ever change. Here's a thing about him, as if it can't ever change. It's garbage. Not just with him, but because they've lost two very high-profile games at the end of years in rivalry fashion, just people are saying it a lot more about him. It's foolish, for lack of a stronger term, because I know the kiddos are listening. It's foolish. So Ohio State this year has the second best odds to win the Big Ten. It's been a while since I said that to you. Michigan's got the best odds to win the Big Ten. Michigan's killed it in the portal too. And they didn't need to. When I say killed it, I don't mean like Colorado. I mean they have bought themselves the ability to cherry pick and sprinkle all over their roster. Well, Ohio State's sort of done the same thing. And those Big Ten championship odds for the first time in a while, you got Michigan, you got Ohio State. Now, I think I would surprise you in telling you Wisconsin is the third favorite. That has everything to do with the division and the imbalance up there. And then Penn State's their fourth at plus 700. So fun times ahead in the Big Ten Conference.